Hi, I'm Linus, and today we're going to be talking about DSLR scanning your film negatives. This is one of my most requested videos of all time, and honestly, my last video on film scanning, how I scan 35mm and 120 film at home, is beyond outdated. After running my film lab for about a year, which is closed right now, but more on that later, I've learned some much more efficient ways to scan film at home at a fraction of the time with much better results than you get with a flatbed. And we all know how long those Epson scanners take. So what is DSLR scanning? DSLR scanning is simply using a digital camera with a macro lens to take a photo of each frame on your negative. From there, you have unconverted negatives just like you do with a flatbed that you can convert to color images using Negative Lab Pro or Film Lab. Now, why would you use DSLR scanning over a flatbed? One, way faster. You can scan a roll of 35mm film in like 3 minutes with a DSLR scanning setup. I'm not kidding. When I switched over to DSLR scanning from flatbed scanning, I actually started shooting 35mm because now it takes no time to scan it and the results look great. 2, way sharper. The DSLR you're using will warrant different results when it comes to DSLR scanning, but you can get very sharp results even with an older DSLR. I use my EOS R, which is currently filming this video, and I get some pretty high-res TIFF files out of this camera with a macro lens. The results I've been getting are way sharper than a flatbed. Flatbeds are inherently a little soft, especially if you're scanning with the borders or putting your film directly on the glass. That focal plane is not always going to hit correctly, so you might get slightly muddy results. With a DSLR, you can literally see every single piece of grain on your negative. You can see the grain on each shot when you scan with a flatbed, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the times it does look muddy. Anyway, I think I've gassed up the medium enough. How about I show you how it works? Here's how you DSLR scan film at home. And if you wait till the end, I'm gonna give away a DSLR scanning setup. So here's what you're gonna need to DSLR scan. I personally use my Canon EOS R because it has focus peaking. Focus peaking is really nice because when you zoom in on the grain, you can tell that it's in focus. Next, you'll need a macro lens. I personally use a Sigma 70mm 2.8 macro, but you can get away with using almost any macro lens for your setup. Spirit levels. You use 2 of these little things to make sure your film carrier and your DSLR are both parallel with each other. If your film is not perfectly parallel with the sensor of your camera, you will start to see part of your negative out of focus. It takes a couple minutes of tweaking, but once those spirit levels look the same, your image is going to be sharp. In order to keep your DSLR suspended in the air, you're going to need a tripod or a copy stand. I use a copy stand with a wooden base because it makes it very easy to just plop my LED panel and my carrier on top of it and very quickly get them all aligned. Tripods are a little bit more finicky, but they're definitely good when you're getting started with this because you don't have to go out and buy a copy stand. Next, you're gonna need an LED panel light. You could start by using a white screen on your phone, or you could grab a $25 panel light on Amazon. Some of these $25 LED panels do not have the most consistent light or color accuracy. You really want a pure white so that your entire image is getting the same amount of light. Again, your phone is gonna be a great starter because its light and color consistency are really, really good. Lastly, a film carrier. If you've ever used an enlarger to enlarge film, or you've taken your film to a lab, both enlargers and film scanners at labs have something called carriers. A carrier pretty much just keeps the film flat so that when you're scanning or enlarging your film, the entire negative stays flat the entire time. There's a ton of great DSLR scanning film carriers, like the Lomography Digitaliza or the Pixelator. The ones I invested in though for my lab were the negative supply carriers. I have a 120 film carrier and a 35mm film carrier. I prefer these because they're made out of aluminum. This thing is never gonna break on you. And they even have a knob on the side that moves frame to frame super efficiently. Why don't we actually do some scanning so you can see how it's done? Okay, so you're gonna put your macro lens on your DSLR, you're gonna mount it on your copy stand, you're gonna take your LED panel, plug it in, put your carrier of choice on your LED panel, and line it up and make sure your spirit levels are properly aligned. We've got our DSLR scanning set up. Now let's talk camera settings. I always leave my aperture between f8 and f11 and leave my ISO as low as I possibly can. We do not need any digital noise. I usually leave my camera in aperture priority. When you leave your camera in aperture priority, it is deciding your shutter speed, which is good because each frame is exposed differently. So when you take a photo of each frame, it's gonna need to capture a different amount of information per frame to make sure it's exposed properly in the conversion. Also, it's super convenient to leave it in aperture priority because you don't have to calibrate frame to frame. It just does that for you. Okay, so finally, you should have your camera tethered to your computer in some way. If you don't have some sort of tethering software, that's fine. You can just take the photos on your camera and then put your SD card in your computer and convert them after the fact. Grab a roll of film, put it in your carrier, and start snapping photos of each negative. Don't mind me cleaning off the dirtiest screen in the entire world. Okay, so I usually use my EOS R, which is the camera recording this video, for DSLR scanning, but I need something to record the video. So I'm using a Sony 7R. I just picked up some film from the lab and I'm ready to scan. Oh, and also I don't have this tethered to my computer, so I'm just gonna scan the entire roll really quick, pop the SD card in my computer and start converting. Our first frame is aligned. I'm gonna come up to the Sony now. Okay, now I'm just focusing on the grain. You can see the focus peaking all over her hands and her face and stuff, so you know it's in focus. Frame 1 done. On this specific carrier, once you get to about the third frame on 35mm, the roller is able to grab onto the roll and pull it through. And that's the entire roll, just like that. Now let's convert some to color. Okay, I'm just gonna sit down. Okay, so now we have scanned our roll of film. It took like a minute to scan through it, and now it's time to convert the images to color. So we're just gonna kind of sit back on the couch, and I'm gonna pop this little thing in the computer and see what we've got. So I've popped my SD card in. I'm going to be opening up Film Lab, which is a new conversion software. It's a standalone software. You just kind of like drag and drop your images in. It's like Negative Lab Pro, but it's just like on its own. So all you have to do is literally just drag and drop, and then it does whatever conversion magic, and eventually you have an image. Boom. This looks really good off the bat. You can zoom in and you can tell it's quite sharp. It's so funny, it's like it's mimicking an enlarger with exposure time and all this brightness and contrast and stuff. As you can see off the bat, we have a color correct, super sharp image, and I'm just gonna go ahead and save this as a 8-bit TIFF. Boom, just like that. Okay, so now I'm gonna show you quite a few images that were on this roll that I converted with Film Lab. Okay, so we scanned some 35mm, now we're gonna use the 120 carrier to scan some 120 film. First things first, I'm gonna need to change the distance of the DSLR. I'm gonna have to raise it up a little bit because 120 film is, you know, larger than 35. I've got two rolls of medium format film. One is Portra 400 and one is Lomo Color Negative 800. Both of these I shot in California and just picked up from the lab today. This is gonna be fun because we're gonna be able to compare these to lab scans. So in this video, we covered what DSLR scanning is, how you actually do it, how you set up your camera and your copy stand and everything you're going to need to actually DSLR scan. And we got some pretty incredible results. It barely took us any time at all to scan an entire roll of 35mm film. To end this video, I want to do something a little bit different. Camera scanning, frankly, changed my life. I used it at my film lab and it helped me speed up production and get scans back to customers so fast. I invested in a full negative supply kit for my lab, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made. So now I want to give a full negative supply camera scanning kit to one of y'all without the DSLR or the macro lens. You'll have to get that yourself, sorry. So this includes a negative supply copy stand, a negative supply LED panel, a negative supply 120 film carrier, and last but not least, something that only exists because at my lab, I would reach out to negative supply and give my honest advice and criticism and what worked and what didn't, because, you know, as a business, that sort of stuff helps them, you know, create better products for the future of this industry. And the same thing with giving away a camera scanning setup. This is gonna help one of y'all shoot a lot more film and scan it way quicker, saving so much time and money. The last thing I'm gonna show you is one of the coolest things that I've personally ever had part in, is the Negative Supply X Linus and his camera purple 35mm film carrier. It's the only product that they've made in another color. All of their carriers have just been a black color up until now. So all you have to do to enter this giveaway is be subscribed to me on YouTube and comment on this video how you currently scan your film. Are you using a flatbed scanner? Are you sending all your film off to a lab? Do you have an old Kodak Pac-On that's about to die? Let me know. I want to know. I think it'd be super interesting to know what you're doing. And if you're not scanning your film at home, tell me that. If you're not scanning film at all and you're about to buy a film camera and you'd like to scan your film at home, let me know that too. I'll be randomly selecting the winner on May 1st. I hope this video really helped. I hope you guys try out camera scanning and check out the link in my description to a couple different methods of camera scanning. I'll have the lomography, digitalizer, the pixelator, and negative supplies linked below because they're all very good options. So as always, I'm Linus and his camera, and I'll see you in the next video.